Within the last 3 weeks, Kenyans have been very busy rejecting the finance bill, both on the streets and on social media. And in the process of rejecting it, we realized that there's a new law that is affecting ancestral land, or rather, that is affecting freehold land that Kenyans own. And that land amendment proposes to start taxing freehold land. And so Kenyans were up in arms talking about how wrong it is, because a lot of Kenyans, if we live in a third world country, and the truth is, a lot of Kenyans depend on their small land for subsistence farming, for survival. And so, if we introduce new taxes on such land, it's going to affect a lot of people. It's going to affect a lot of people. And I started researching about how will this new amendment affect our cost of living and affect Kenyans in general. And because it's always very important to do your assignment, I figured it's very important to bring Wamuyu back, our in-house conveyancing lawyer, to teach us more about what this proposal says, whether it is going to be in effect, and how far it's gone to the process of it becoming a real law. So Wamuyu, welcome to my set.
Thank you, Agatha. It's always such a pleasure to be back here. I'm now the self-proclaimed resident conveyancing lawyer. Yes. So yes, I'm so excited to be here. And as you've mentioned, in the last about 3 weeks to 1 month there, we've witnessed a very revolutionary time in Kenya. Yes. Where now we see the people taking power into their own arms. We've always talked about, as a lawyer, in my constitutional law class, we always talked about we the people, yes, the sovereign people being the ones that hold the sovereign power. Yes. But it's so glad to be alive at a time when people are actually deciding to exercise that power and saying we the people want this and that. Yes. And so I'm really excited. But also in line with that issue came up where now people were complaining that there's a law that is seeking to tax freehold land or people's ancestral land. And that's why we are here to have that discussion. One, talk about what that proposal was, where it is at, what land it was affecting, whether the bill is still in the process or it was withdrawn. And as we conclude, also we'll talk about the other taxes that have been in existence, and the ones that are not controversial and that affect real estate, because Kenyans love land. Yeah, Kenyans love land, and it's easy to see why. First of all, there's always the ever increasing demand for housing. The population is always increasing, but there's no way the square footage of land in Kenya will increase. Yeah. And other than even the economic reasons, there's also some very cultural reasons. Some people just want this personal gratification of, I own a home, I have place where my children can come for Christmas, and we have barbecue and all that. Yeah. And also even some other reasons, like even having a place to bury their dead, because not everyone wants to be buried at Langata. Yes. So land will always be important. And so as we invest in land, it's important that we also understand the taxation regime, so that we are able to first predict the actual return on investment, and two, be compliant. Yes. So yes, I'm very excited to have this discussion.
Thank you, Wamuyu, for giving us a proper insight into why it's very important for us to have this conversation. And so at the Well Tribe, I teach you how to diversify your investment portfolio. And investing in real estate is one of the ways to diversify your investment portfolio. And so you have to be very conversant of your return on investment in any investment that you take up. And it's very important for you to be tax compliant, because if you're not, one day, Wamoy has taught us in previous videos that, one day the government can come and process your land because of there's so many bills, there's so many pending bills you have on your property. And that's why we're having this conversation today. So Wamoyo, let's dive in and start with what happened, who proposed this bill, how did it come to parliament? And first of all, why is it that Kenyans only became aware? I am one of those guilty ones. I only became aware when it was like at its third reading. Why were we not aware from the very beginning?
That's a very good question. And as I've mentioned, I think we are in a very new phase of our civil of our civil lives as Kenyans. Yes. And of course, it was propagated by the finance bill once people realized, we've really been pushed to the corner, we need to have a discussion about this. And now, once that area opened up on the issue of the finance bill, then now it was easier for us to identify the other laws that are in the process and that will affect us very negatively. And that's why now the issue of that idea to tax freehold land. Actually, That proposal was not in the finance bill.
Yes.
Not to say that people's fears are not legitimate, they are.
Yeah.
It was just not in the finance bill. It was contained in the Land Laws Amendment Bill of 2023. But be that as it may, it's not a very good law, so it's important that it found its way into the discussion on the finance bill.
Yes.
Now, what was the proposal about? The proposal, and maybe also before we understand what the proposal was about, I think it's important that we first understand the land regime or the forms of ownership of land in Kenya.
Yes.
And we have two major forms. One, you can either own land freehold tenure,
Yes.
or freehold kind of land holding, or leasehold. And maybe just to also try and illustrate it to well tribal so that we understand, I think a lot of you are very familiar with this kind of document. Yeah, because about % of freehold land in Kenya is represented by the titles that look something like this. A lot of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with this form of title. It's a typical title deed for freehold land, and basically it's a 4-page document that, the front page just shows you the title number and the current registered proprietor, and then we have this very important seal. It has, of course, this is a copy, but in the original document, you should be able to fill the seal from the Ministry of Lands and then see the land registrar's signature. Then we have the second page that talks, I'll probably not take you through the whole of it, but we have the second page that shows it goes into more details about the property and also shows the current registered proprietor. We have the third page that shows the registered third-party interest. So third-party interests are, so for example, you've taken a loan with a bank and offered that title as security. There's a charge that gets registered and it's shown on the third page. It's called the encumbrance section page. Yes. And then now we have the last page that doesn't have a lot of information. So this is a typical title for freehold land. And as I've said, about 80% of freehold land in Kenya has a title like this. Now, we have a few parcels here and there whose title looks something different, but for today, we'll not get into it because it's another long discussion which we'll have in the course of time. Yes. But now, away from freehold land, we have leasehold land. Now, and this is a typical title for leasehold land. Of course, this is one of the new generational titles, but it's not very different in form. So you will notice that with the freehold land, the document is called a title deed. And with the leasehold land, the document is called a certificate of lease. Yes. Okay? Yes. Now, having understood, and it looks like just the same way, the same form, 4-page document, having the same information. And the only difference is that with the title deed, maybe as we come back, with the title deed, we have very limited details at the top here. We just have the title number, the size of the property, and the registry map sheet. With the leasehold title, we have a bit more information. There's a part called rent. Okay? There's a part called rent, and then it indicates the amount that is payable. And on top of that, we have term. Now, just to explain it, with leasehold land, you own land for a limited period of time. Yes. With freehold land, you own it in perpetuity. So you own it forever and ever. You don't ever need to renew it. With leasehold land, you own it for a limited period of time because essentially the land belongs to the government. Then the government leases it to you for a particular period of time. Okay. So most leasehold titles have a term of 99 years. But we have a few that have a term of 50 years. Like this is a typical title that has 50 years, but a majority of them have the term is 99 years. Okay. That means the government is allowing you to use or own that land for the 99 years or for the 50 years, as the case may be. And at the expiry of that period, you are required to go back to the government to seek a renewal of your lease. Okay. Okay? Yeah, yes. Now, that we have understood freehold land and leasehold land. As we've said, freehold land, you own it in perpetuity, you never need to renew it. Yes. Leasehold land, you own it for a limited period of time, and at the expiry of that limited period of time, you're required to go back to the government to renew it. Yes. Now, another thing with the leasehold land, you pay something called rent, because again, we are saying, essentially,
you are leasing. It's like the way you would like I live in a rental apartment.
Exactly.
So I'm required at the end of the month to pay rent.
Exactly.
So it's the same concept.
It's the same concept here. The government owns it.
Yes.
It has allowed you to lease it for 99 years.
Yes.
But during this period of time, you will pay an annual rent every year.
Yes.
As the consideration of the price.
Yes.
And this land rent ranges from anything between a peppercorn. A peppercorn is a very small pebble. Basically, when you see a title where rent is written peppercorn, it's a colonial term to mean a very small pebble. So it means you pay nothing. When your certificate of lease is written peppercorn, it means you don't pay anything.
Okay.
But of course, that is always subject to, it can be revised by the government at any time.
Yes.
But at the time it reads peppercorn, you don't pay anything. Okay. So it ranges from a peppercorn to 3,000, 8,000, 20,000, 200,000, 500,000. And of course, this amount varies with the location of the property, because location of the property always determines the value of the property. Okay. So the higher the value, the more land rent you pay.
Okay.
The lower the value,
yes. Okay.
the lower the value, the less land rent you pay.
Okay.
So now we've understood land rent.
Yes, I have understood. It's very clear.
Yes. Yes. So, and this is one tax that most people don't know about, because I've experienced clients where I tell them, have you settled your land rent? And they ask, what? I pay my rates. I'm like, no. I'm not talking about land rates. I'm talking about land rent.
Yes.
So just to be clear, land rent is only applicable to leasehold land.
Yes.
It's paid annually to the national government. Yes. And the amount is indicated on the title.
Yes. So it's not guesswork.
It's not guesswork. The amount is always indicated on the title. So that land rent. Away from land rent, we have a levy called land rates.
Before you go to land rates,
yes,
because you are here and you taught us about the process of buying land in Kenya.
Yes.
And we didn't have this specific conversation.
Yes.
I wanted to know, if I see an ad on TV, on the newspapers, on social media, how do I know that the land that is being advertised, how do I differentiate whether the land that is being advertised is either freehold or leasehold? At what point will I know?
You can ask from the time go.
Okay.
You can ask, is this land a freehold? And in fact, you don't even need to ask, because as we discussed in our previous videos, and maybe you're going to link them in the description so that the well tribals that haven't had an opportunity to look at them can see, because we talked very exhaustively on how to buy vacant land, how to do your due diligence, how to do the paperwork, the whole process. And we also talked about apartments, and of which apartments also sit on a piece of land. So we said one of the first steps to take, even before you sign anything, even before you pay anything, ask for a copy of the title. Okay?
Makes sense now, yes.
So the moment you have a copy of the title, it will either a title deed or a certificate of lease. But in the events, it's not one of these two, again, you can talk to a lawyer, because I said there's a small majority of parcels that have a different kind of title, but your lawyer can always guide you. But maybe just to give people a clue.
Yes.
If it's not one of these two titles, to know if that title is freehold or leasehold, you look for a word called fee simple.
Okay, fee simple.
Yes. You see the word fee simple in any title, know if that means freehold.
Okay.
But in a majority of the cases, you'll find these two titles.
Yes.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yes.
If now I'm in the process of buying land and I have seen, let's say it's leasehold, right? I've been shown the certificate, it's leasehold.
Yeah.
Because now, obviously, that's an extra. I'm in the process of buying a piece of land.
Yes.
Ideally, as a Kenyan, most Kenyans don't know this, that they're actually land rent that you're supposed to pay. So as I am going to buy land, I am expecting that it is freehold, that I hold this land forever. So if I go and see that it is leasehold land, should I be worried?
No, I wouldn't say you should be worried.
Is it a disadvantage, or rather is it a disadvantage? Yes, it's a disadvantage to buy a leasehold land over freehold land. And imagine if there are two sellers, and one is selling me a leasehold land and the other one is selling me a freehold land.
Now that's a very good question.
Yeah.
And I would say the answer is it depends.
Okay.
Why does it depend? You will find leasehold titles, they are found in the cities, in the urban areas, and the municipalities.
Yes.
Where land is definitely of a higher value. You are more likely to get more income or more return from land in a municipality than from land in in the rural areas.
Yes.
So you can do the maths. For
Yes.
example, so you see, if you're buying land, say somewhere in what do I use as an example? If you're buying land in Westlands, it's very unlikely that first you'll find a freehold title.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Yes.
Because most of the parcels in Westlands, they are leasehold.
Yes.
Now, you see, now the consideration you have to make is what is the possible return versus what are the expenses that comes with it. So if I pay 50,000 every year as land rent while earning 10 million from this piece of land,
Yes.
then the math is nothing.
Yes.
So I think that's the consideration. But in the case where you've said, you're saying there's one seller who is selling a freehold title, and another one has a leasehold title, but they're in the same location, and you're likely to get the same return on investment.
Yes.
Definitely go for the freehold title.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
I asked that question because a lot of us Kenyans buy land, and we think that this land is going to appreciate in value. So I wondered, what if I buy a piece of land whose land rent is higher than the appreciation value, right? And that's why we're talking about the return on investment. Yeah.
Now, it's very unlikely because, as I've said, the land rent is, one, it's not very expensive. Maybe just to demystify that fact. It's not very expensive because I've said it's there are some titles that attract the rent of a peppercorn, which means you pay nothing.
Yes.
But even the ones that attract land rent, it's not very expensive. I would say compared to the land rates, which we're coming to discuss, compared to land rates, land rent is not very expensive.
Okay.
For as long as you're getting, it's very unlikely that you'll have land rent that is higher than your return on investment. Okay. It's very unlikely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Then we can move on.
Yes.
Yeah. To land rates.
Yes, to land rates.
Yes.
And maybe just to recap so that we don't get confused. These two taxes can be very confusing. Just to recap, rent is charged on leasehold land.
Yes.
And it's indicated on the title, and it's paid to the national government, and it's an annual tax.
Yes.
Land rates, they are charged by the county government, okay? As opposed to the land rent that is paid to the national government, land rates are paid to the county government. That means you pay your land rates to the county government where your property is located, now that we have a decentralized form of government.
Yes.
So if your land is in Murang'a town, you go to Murang'a. So the same offices you go to get your work, to get your business permits, they're the same place you go to get your land rates. Now, as opposed to the rent that is indicated on the title, rates are never indicated on the title.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to know first if your property so let's now cover which properties attract land rates. Now that we have said rent only applies to leasehold.
Yes.
Okay? Yeah. Rent only applies to leasehold. Freehold has never attracted any rent. Of which now that will lead us to the discussion in the finance from the finance bill discussions.
Yeah.
So land rates, it can apply to either leasehold land or freehold land.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Majority of the time, because we've said leasehold land is most leasehold properties are found within municipalities.
Yes.
And because in the municipalities, there are certain services you get from the county government.
Yes.
Whether it's sewerage connectivity, whether it's water connectivity, electrical connectivity, garbage collection. These are services that properties in municipalities get from the county government.
Yeah, and why you're paying the
rates. That's why you're paying the rates, so that you can sustain, or rather, that's the price you pay for the services that you get from the county government.
Yes, yes.
So that is what justifies paying off land rates.
Yes, yes.
So I've said most leasehold properties which are found in municipalities will almost always attract land rates. Okay? Freehold titles. The freehold titles that are in the interior, most of them do not attract land rates.
Yes, and it makes sense.
Yes, yes. Because usually there's no services you're getting from the county as such.
Yes,
there's no garbage collection. People burn their litter. So it makes sense that the freehold titles that are in the interior do not attract any land rates. But as your land moves closer to the towns, then it's likely that it will attract land rates, whether it's freehold or leasehold.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And now we've said, because this is a tax that is collected by the county government. You go to the Kanjo offices, you give them a copy of the title, they tell you first, whether your title attracts rates, and two, they tell you what is the outstanding amount. And it's important to check every single year so that you pay, you are compliant. And the reason why I'm saying, in fact, land rates are more serious than land rents. And this is why.
Okay.
The penalties that are charged, the penalties and interest that are charged on land rates are very hefty. And if you remember very well, every now and then you'll see an advert on the TV or in the paper saying,
I was about to ask that. Waivers. That's
yes,
billboard
the
for
county
waiver.
government is waiving waivers and interest,
Yeah.
so that if you pay the principal within a certain period of time in lump sum, then they can waive the interest and the penalties,
Yes.
because they are very hefty. I gather I've seen people having to pay hundreds of thousands in terms of accumulated or arrears. Land rates arrears now, when it attracts penalties and interest, it becomes very, very hefty.
Okay, now it makes sense.
Very hefty.
Yes.
Which is why people are always running after those waivers. I've actually seen a transaction fail on the basis of this person had not paid their land rates for so long. So when they were selling this property, and as I was representing the person who was buying, we insisted we want the arrears cleared.
Yes.
When they went to check the invoice, because they had not paid for a long period of time, and a lot of penalties and interest had accrued, the amount they were being asked for to sell to so that they can clear off, it was so much, it didn't even make any sense to sell anymore.
Yeah.
Because they were like, now we would have to now wait until there's a waiver, we clear this amount. And now, because for us we couldn't wait until they get the waiver, the sale fell through.
So it's possible for someone to have a piece of land, they want to sell because of a financial emergency.
Yes.
And you're unable to sell because of how much rates.
Absolutely. Another incident, I had this client, and that was beginning of last year. It's literally the first transaction I did in the beginning of 2023.
Yes.
This client had gotten into problems with, her business. Sometimes business environment can get very shaky. So she had gotten into problems with her business. Something happened and she was not getting any income. And the only way she could get some money is to get financing from her bank. Of course, I'm not going to mention the bank, but she went to her bank, she got approved for this facility, and she was going to use now her title as a security.
I can see where this is going.
Of course, we initiated the process. So I was the lawyer that was in charge of doing the securitization.
Yes.
And and because this was a distress kind of money that was needed, we needed to do it very fast. So you're at the land registry today, you are at Kanjo tomorrow. So we did the registration so fast. But before we could forward the documents to the bank, we had to go clear the land rates and the land rents. And when we went to check the invoices for the land rates, and so this is someone who had never paid these both rates and rent for the entire period of time they had this title, and it was over 10 years. So by the time we were getting the invoices, it was in excess of 200,000. And this was already somebody struggling to put food on the table.
Yes.
So you can imagine the amount of pressure she found herself in, because she has to pay this amount for the bank to disburse the loan.
Yes.
And
so the bank will not take a title deed as a form of security that has arrears in terms of land rates.
Yes, most of them do not. Basically because it's a debt.
You know how important that statement is? Because a lot of people hold their title deeds in the name of, if I ever get into any form of trouble, I will get a loan from it. And the minute you told me we need to have this conversation about taxes, I told you that even I have never thought of walking into the county government's office and asking them, so this title deed, how much do I own? So from today, we really need to be active about making sure that we are compliant.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's the same thing. It goes back to our previous conversation about how making sure that your real estate investments, you're getting the most out of them.
Yes.
So in this case, you can actually not get anything out of your real estate investment because, wow.
Yeah, so in this particular case, the lady had to take that, had to get someone to loan her that amount, which was a very distressing kind of situation. I don't even like to remember.
So she's in double trouble financially.
Yeah, because you get the loan disbursement, but instead of getting the stock that you intended to get to boost your business, you now have to repay this loan first. And I mean, the best thing is to keep tabs of
Yes.
Your land rates, your land rent. And now that we've understood the two forms of ownership, leasehold and freehold, and we
Yes.
have known which one attracts which levy,
Yes.
now let's come to the proposal.
Yes.
Now, the proposal that was in the Land Laws Amendment Bill of 2023 was that because we have people that have freehold titles in towns, in
Yes.
municipalities, in
Yes.
cities,
Yes.
and they do not pay land rent like their counterparts who hold leasehold land,
Yes.
let us bring some levy, some kind of levy, just to equalize these two
Equalize,
landowners.
yes, yes.
Let's bring some sort of land levy so that the person that owns a freehold title in a municipality will pay a land levy. Of course, they couldn't call it a land rent because this is not leasehold.
Land, yeah.
So they just called it a land levy.
Yes, yes.
So let's get this person to pay a land levy that is equivalent to the land rent paid by someone in the same locality
Yes.
and with the same size of land.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And recently I listened to by the time we are having this discussion, our cabinet just got
Dissolved.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
But a while
can
back,
say the
about
former.
yes. So about 2 weeks ago, I listened to the former CS for lands,
Yes.
Honorable Alice Wahome,
Yeah.
and she was talking about what was the motivation or why they were proposing that particular land levy. And her argument was because these two people are in an area where they're getting services from the government. Remember, we said land rent is paid to the national government.
Yes.
And now, when we come to issues of infrastructure, you will find that the national government is the one that is in charge of the major infrastructural projects.
Yes.
So, for example, if it comes to road construction of roads or road connectivity, it falls under the national government. When it comes to connectivity of electricity and water, mostly the bigger infrastructural projects are undertaken by the national government.
Yes.
Then the county government comes in to do the administration.
Okay.
Yes. So these are services. So both of these two people who own land in Nairobi are getting equal services from the national government, but only one is paying for it.
Yes,
the one that owns
leasehold
title.
Yes, yes.
So the argument was let's break this discrimination and let's make everyone pay.
Yes.
And the examples that she was using, we have quite a number of properties in Karen, Lavington, especially those two areas. There are quite a number of freehold titles. And now they feel like the people who own those freehold titles in those areas, their land is worth so much. Why are they not paying
anything
when someone who owns an eighth plot of land in Kasarani is paying land rent? There's no justification.
Yes.
And while that argument makes a lot of sense, the challenge that I think a lot of stakeholders had, including us lawyers, including the National Land Commission, who now the bodies that were in opposition of that proposal, is that first of all it could open a Pandora box, because when it comes to defining urban areas, fine, it's okay you're saying that someone in Karen is not paying land rent, but what about the person in the shosho that is in Ruaka,
Yes.
and she's living on her ancestral land,
Yes.
but because Ruaka has become so modernized or has really become, urbanized, she's now also made to pay land rent. There's no equity there.
Yes.
So those are some of the challenges that came up with that proposal. As I understand, that bill has already been withdrawn, or rather shelved. I would say shelved.
Shelved, yeah.
Because you never know if it could be reintroduced, a few years down the line. But basically, that was what the government was seeking. So it's getting people who own freehold land in urban areas or in municipalities to pay land levy that is equivalent to the land rent paid by owners of leasehold land within the same areas.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe that's the best way I can explain what the proposal
and I'm
was
glad
about.
you've given your opinion about how this could affect so many livelihoods. I think maybe sometimes I feel like when people in leadership make such proposals, they never really think of the common one.
They do not.
They always think about the people who are living in Karen.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because when we make such laws in this country, even if the difference is 1,000 bob or 2,000 bob. That 1,000 bob or 2,000 bob is the difference between a poor person deciding that I can no longer afford 3 meals in a day. We will only do 2 meals or 1 meal in a day.
Imagine.
Yes, so they really need to think like they are representing all the Kenyans, not just the wealthy. So so now we understand what that it was all about, and now it makes sense why people are angry about it. Yes, there needs to be, that, and then of course the other bit I saw people saying that if this was to become a law, the CS would have so much power, right? Like she would wake up tomorrow and decide now Rwaka is a part of a municipality, or she wakes up tomorrow and says, which is very dangerous to have somebody with so much power. And that is why we need to follow the constitution. We need to protect everyone. Now that we understand that, and now that we understand it's been shelved, and if it comes back, we will come back again.
And have a discussion. Exactly.
So now then it means we can move on to other forms of taxes that are low, right? These ones are not bills or proposals that are low, that are very, very important for us as well tribers to understand, in order for us to always make sure that we are tax compliant. Now take us through.
Now, the other taxes, and I think I'll start with the most, I would say, do I say the most expensive, which is stamp duty. So stamp duty is a tax that is taxed on, of course, amongst other things, transfer of property. So whenever you're buying land, whenever you're buying an apartment, or whenever you're buying a house, a bungalow, whatever it is you're buying, the transaction will attract a stamp duty. So this is the tax paid on transfer of property, and it is paid by the purchaser. And it is rated at either 4% or 2%. Now, just as we were discussing this title, as you go towards the interior, towards the rural areas, you pay 2%. As you come to the more developed areas of town, you pay 4%. Okay?
And it's paid by the person who's buying.
It is paid by the person who is buying. So it's 4% in municipalities or in developed areas, and 2% in agricultural areas, the interiors. And this tax is very important. First of all, I think you remember when we were talking about the process of purchasing apartments, we said it's one of the taxes that it's one of the costs you really need to budget for accordingly. Because it can be very costly. And this is tax that is paid just before registration. In fact, the law mandates the land registrar to confirm that the tax is paid before they can transfer ownership of land from one person to another. And before you pay stamp duty, there's the law mandates that a valuation has to be undertaken. Currently, we only have government valuers allowed to do valuation. So they either come to the site and do valuation, or they do desk valuation, depending on how familiar they are with the area. Then based on the valuation, then you pay 4% or 2% of the prevailing market value. And this tax is applicable whether it's a sale or a gift, or literally, if my mom decided to give me a piece of land today, it does not matter that it's a gift or that,
because it's changing ownership.
It's changing ownership, you have to pay stamp duty. There are very few exemptions, or there are very few circumstances where stamp duty is exempt. And even then, you have to prove a lot of these facts to the collector of stamp duty. So, for example, if I can just pick one of a few examples where stamp duty is exempt, which are very, again, I'm saying very, very limited. One, it's transfer of property from the estate of a deceased person to the beneficiaries. So if somebody has died, and now you're doing the process of administration of the property, and you're transferring the property from the name now of the dead person to the name of the beneficiaries, in that case, that transaction is exempt from stamp duty. If again, it's in a divorce scenario where a couple have officially divorced in court, and now they're doing division of matrimonial properties. So whatever properties will be transferred from the husband to the wife, or from the wife to the husband, again, they are exempt from stamp duty. But again, you have to prove all those facts, that these people are divorced, they were married, and now they're divorced, and here is evidence, and now this is why the transaction is exempt from stamp duty. So those are the kind of transactions that are exempt from stamp duty. Very few, and you have to prove all these facts. Otherwise, in every other single transaction, you pay stamp duty, 4% in municipalities, 2% in the interiors. So that is stamp duty tax. Most of the time, people don't. Stamp duty tax is one of those taxes that are hard to to evade. So most people don't evade that, except in those, we have some scenarios of tax evasion, especially in the district registries. With the brokers and the registrar, there are some who play some monkey business and end up not paying. But, if you're serious about the investment, you should be,
Yes. Yes.
you should ensure that, you comply with that particular law. Because part of the consequences of not paying stamp duty or evading stamp duty is that the title can easily be cancelled.
I was about to ask that.
Yes.
So your title can actually be cancelled. So
because it's not valid. The law says the registrar to confirm stamp duty is paid before doing transfer. So if they find that there's a transfer that has been done and a title printed, but stamp duty was not paid, anybody can go to court and get that title invalidated, and now you have to start afresh. Another thing that I've seen, KRA also puts restrictions. If they find out that there's a stamp duty you evaded, they can. I've said avoided.
Yes.
Avoided is not an offense. Evaded.
Evaded, yes.
Yes, there's a stamp duty that you evaded. They're allowed to go to the registry and put a restriction on the title, basically ensuring that you cannot transact with that title until they clear it. So basically, because you don't want to be in conflict with the taxman, it's important that you comply.
Yes.
The second tax is the capital gains tax.
Yes.
Now, the capital gains tax, this is a tax you pay on selling a property. Okay? We said stamp duty is what you pay on buying.
Yes.
When selling, most times it's predicted that you will make a gain.
Yes.
Okay? When you make a gain, you are supposed to pay 15% of the net gain as stamp duty.
When you talk about gain, it's the difference between this is how much I bought this property and this is how much it's valued at the moment.
Yes,
so
but there's some adjustments. Yes, but there are some adjustments. So, of course, when it comes to the actual calculation, you should sit down with either your lawyer or your editor or your accountant so that they can do the computation for you. But basically, it's the amount you are selling it for, and then also including the transfer cost.
Yes.
Then you subtract the amount you bought it for.
Yes.
And then there are some allowable deductions. Some of the allowable deductions are something like, say there was a dispute over this piece of land and you had to maybe go to court to defend that title, and there's some money you used on legal fees and court charges and all that, you are allowed to factor in that amount when calculating your net gain.
Yes.
Another thing that I know is allowed is what it's called an incidental cost. It's the cost of improving the property. So, for example, you did a borehole.
Okay.
Of course, that improved the value of the property.
Yes, yes.
Or if you built a house, definitely you improved the value of that house. So that cost is factored in calculating your net gain. So that now you pay 15% of the net gain. And interesting enough, Zakayo atashuka. This is a tax that never used to be there. It was done away in 1985.
Okay.
It was done away with just to to speed some economic growth.
Yes.
It was reintroduced in 2015 as 5%.
Yeah.
Again, along the way, it was increased to 12.5. It's actually, I think, last year when it was again increased to 15%.
15% is too high.
I know.
If we're being honest.
I know.
For real estate investment, 15% is too high.
It is quite high. It is quite high. And this is the tricky thing with capital gains tax. A lot of people don't pay capital gains. Okay, there are people who try to evade capital gains tax, but this is the trick, the tricky situation. You see now, every time you do a transaction, you pay stamp duty.
Yes.
When the purchaser is declaring the stamp duty, they have to feed in both the KRA PIN of the person transferring or the seller and the buyer.
Yes.
So whether you pay it or not, it has reflected somewhere in KRA's system that there's property that has changed hands, and this is the amount of stamp duty that was paid. Of course, and from the stamp duty, they can tell the value
of the land.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you do not voluntarily declare the capital gains tax and pay it, the KRA might just see it. Probably nobody will come at you now in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
You sell your property, use your money, enjoy, go on vacation. And then you could now do that. And then 8 months down the line, you find an email from KRA. Records from our system showed that you sold land to this and this person at this and this amount. And because then they don't have the values, they'll calculate for you based on the amount you sold.
Yes.
And then they tell you to provide documentation within 7 days or pay up, or it's now a tax dispute.
Also, this shows that it's very important to keep records if you own such property.
Absolutely. Because now when it comes to now filing for the capital gains, you have to show proof. You can just say, I went to court to defend my title and I paid 300,000 as legal fees. You
Where
need to
the
show up
receipts?
some receipts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So documentation, of course, is definitely very, very important. And, keeping sale agreements, keeping the bank statements, the receipts, they're definitely very important for the purposes of filing the capital gains tax.
Wow.
Yeah.
But for me, the takeaway for capital gains tax is that 15% is extremely high. Honestly, the return on investment that you get from most unproductive pieces of land is too low for you to be paying
Although also we have
15%.
some exemptions. We
Yeah.
have some exemptions for capital gains. They are a bit more lenient as opposed to stamp duty. And maybe just to give an example of some three of them. One, if the gain has been if the gain will be taxed elsewhere. For example, if I'm a real estate company, I sell land, and out of the profits, at the end of the day, I declare income. I declare income tax.
Yes.
Then that is exempt because I'll pay for that gain elsewhere.
Yes.
So that is exempt from capital gains tax.
Yes, that makes sense.
Again, when you're selling agricultural land that is less than, I think, 100 acres, and if it's in the town areas, if it's less than 50 acres, but it's agricultural, then again, you are exempt from capital gains tax. The other exemption of capital gains tax that I can think about is, which one is this? When you're selling property, your private residence, which you have been living in for the last 3 years. So if you sell your private residence that you have been living in the preceding 3 years, of which you have to prove, then again, you are exempted from the capital gains tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
so
sense.
Those are some of the exemptions.
Okay. And to be clear, one big difference between stamp duty and capital gains tax is that stamp duty is being paid by the buyer.
Yes.
And capital gains tax is being paid by the seller.
The seller, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then can go on.
The other tax we can cover a bit is, I don't know if we should start with VAT or we do that. Let's cover rental income tax.
Okay.
And recently, the KRA has really been very aggressive when it comes to collecting taxes. And one of the taxes they have been aggressive on is the rental income tax. Because for a long time, people have not been paying rental income tax.
Yeah.
But currently, they are really collecting information and appointing tax agents and, charging rental income tax. So as the name suggests, this is a tax that is paid on rental income.
Yes.
So if you collect rental income of between 288,000 and 15 million, currently I know you're supposed to pay a monthly tax of 7.5% of the gross rent.
Yes, gross. Very important.
No, it doesn't allow for deductions.
I've interacted with people who want to play around with that tax, where they're like, oh, what if I'm paying for garbage? What if so it's gross.
For the monthly regime, if it's between 288,000 and 15 million, you pay 7%, 7.5% of the gross of the gross rent that you collect every month. And this has to be filed by the 20th of the subsequent month.
Yes.
Of course, this one you really need to be compliant, because KRA has been slapping people with really hefty penalties for rental income tax. And again, if it's above 15 million, you don't pay under the monthly regime, but you still pay it somehow in the graduated, the graduated scale for rental income.
Yes.
The annual annual income, the graduated scale.
Yeah.
Then you pay under that if it's above 15 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So I won't go into so much details about the rental income tax. Of course, this is a tax I don't interact with a lot in my day-to-day conveyancing transactions. So if there are any more questions about it, it's important that you sit down with your auditor or your accountant, or just a tax agent, and they can advise you better.
Yes.
The other tax. Okay,
so we talked about stamp duty, capital gains, rental income tax. So maybe now we can talk about VAT.
Yes, VAT, value-added tax. Now, value-added tax, this is not a tax that you will interact with every day when it comes to transfer of property, because it only applies for commercial, like fully commercial buildings or properties. So if you buy some warehouse somewhere along Mombasa Road, trust me, you're not just paying the purchase price. You're paying the purchase price plus 16%. VAT.
Okay.
If you're buying this commercial building in Westlands, you're paying the purchase price plus
VAT.
16% VAT.
Is it one off?
Yes, it is one off.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So they'll just calculate, tell you, oh, we are selling this apartment for 15 million, so you do 15 million plus VAT 16%. But this is the tax that is collected by the seller. So the law mandates that it's collected by the seller and then remitted. So it will be
Remitted.
charged on the purchaser,
Yeah.
but remitted by the seller.
Okay. It's very important to know that.
Yeah, just like VAT for services. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's indeed
Yeah,
true. Yes,
that's the same model.
Yeah, the small business owner who's registered for VAT,
Yes.
it's you who collects it, and then
Yes.
you remit to KRA.
Yes.
Same thing. Okay,
Yes.
makes sense.
And this, and also maybe just to touch on rental income. It is also charged on rental income for commercial premises.
Okay.
Commercial premises only.
Yes.
So
yes.
you'll realize if you have a house that you live in and it's somewhere in the neighborhoods, and then you have an office in town, you'll always pay your rent as it is. But for the office rent, it always attracts a 16% VAT.
Yes.
So it's specifically for commercial properties or commercial units.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I think that's the much I can talk about VAT.
Yeah, I think also a lot of people clearly don't interact with VAT on a day-to-day basis. It's only business owners where, it makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously, if you are a business owner or you're in the process of buying something that huge, like a warehouse, talk to a Moyo. That's why we're not diving deep, because that a lot of people don't interact with this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Which other tax? So far, the fifth tax.
I think the fifth tax is maybe what we talked about, the land rates and the land levies. No, not land levies. The land rates and the land rates.
Yes.
Those ones we discussed them comprehensively at the beginning of the video. Maybe just to go over it. Land rent is charged on all leasehold properties, and the amount is indicated on the title, and you pay it to the national government, and you pay it annually.
Yes.
Okay. Now this one, it's a bit easier to even find the invoices because this has been electronized, so you can find it on Adisasa. You generate the invoice, you pay on M-Pesa, you get a receipt. You literally don't need to go and queue anywhere.
Yes.
So that's the beauty about it. Land rates apply for all land in municipalities or urban areas. So it doesn't matter whether your land is freehold or leasehold, as long as it's an area where you're getting a lot of services from the county government, then you're required to pay land rates. And to find out whether your title attracts land rates and how much it is or what your arrears are, you visit the county offices. The same offices you go to get your business permit, that's the same offices you go to inquire about your land rates.
Yes, that is very clear.
Yes.
So is that all when it comes to all the taxes we should be aware of?
I think those are the ones that I can think about at the moment.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Or rather the ones that I have interacted with on a daily basis.
Okay. So far you have taught us about five, let me call them 5 forms of tax. There's the stamp duty, there's the capital gains tax, there's the rental income, there's the value added tax, and then there's the land rent and land rates, which is very important, right? So 5 forms of taxes. Clearly adulting is difficult. If as an adult who just wants to buy a piece of land has to think about all these forms of compliance, that's why we insist that financial literacy is very important. You realize?
Absolutely.
I don't think the average Kenyan, when they are thinking of buying a plot of land, thinks about all these forms of taxes. You just think that I need to acquire a form of land somewhere, which is why we do this. We really need to educate as many people as possible, because it would be a very heartbreaking thing for you to work so hard, because Kenyans save for years to buy a home. Kenyans save for years to buy an apartment, to buy a piece of land. It would be very sad for you to work so hard to buy that property and then end up having that property being maybe repossessed simply because you didn't know these things. That's why we do what we do. So, Wamoyo, is there any other thing you feel that you haven't said that we should be aware of?
I think maybe just to sensitize people about tax compliance. And Agatha, is me and you being people who are in business, a lot of us don't like paying taxes. We don't like filing taxes. But at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, it's more expensive to not be compliant than to be compliant. And it's just adulting. Of course, we promised you are not Zakayo's agent. But yeah, but I think it's better to be compliant, because as we were mentioning, some of the consequences are very harsh, including the government has the right to repossess your property, especially the county government when it comes to rates. They have the right to even repossess your piece of land and auction to recover their land rates. In those extreme scenarios.
Auction you in
Yes, they're allowed.
Yes.
They are allowed.
Yeah.
Of course, that's in the extreme situation where they have accrued for so many years and there's no willingness by you to pay. So of course they have that right. They rarely exercise it.
Yes.
But then again, it also restricts your usage of that property, because you can't sell it. You can't. You can't get a bank to take it as a security. Sometimes they can even place the restriction. And again, as I told you about capital gain, sometimes they come a year later. So you sold the land, you got the proceeds, you ate, and now you have a tax dispute at the time when you don't have any money.
Yes.
And anybody who has had a tax dispute with KRA before the tax dispute tribunal, they'll tell you it's the worst place you want to be. So just to encourage the tribers to be tax compliant, and if they have any questions, talk to your lawyer. Talk to your auditor, talk to your accountant, and they should guide you on the filing process and the payment process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tax planning is part of financial literacy.
It is.
Tax planning, we've been, I like the fact that as we move along with Wealth Tribers, we've been talking about how to invest. At some point, I've been talking about how important taking insurance is, because there's acquiring of your wealth, and then there's protecting of your wealth that you use insurance. And now we've just been introduced something very important, tax planning, because most of us ignore it, and most of us focus 90% of our energy in terms of accumulating the wealth. But think of it this way: what if you accumulate and then you lose it all simply because you didn't call someone, right? Simply because you didn't hire an accountant, simply because you didn't call a lawyer. And from this conversation today, which I really enjoyed, today felt like it was today felt like the class was for me. So I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like key takeaways in this conversation is that if you own a piece of land somewhere, if you own a property rather anywhere, whether it is Ushago, ama it is in town or in part of this Kenya, please go to your kanjo, right? Please, Kali, take that title deed and take it to your kanjo and ask them, here's my title deed. Do I owe any money? Because it is better for you to go and realize you owe 100,000, and therefore you decide that for the next 3 months I'm going to pay it in installments, as opposed to for you waiting for 8 years, and maybe you want to give that piece of land to your children, and then they have to bear that burden. So do the right thing. Be tax compliant. And with that, my name is Agatha.
I've just remembered that I didn't tackle apartments.
Yes.
And I'm sure this question will be asked somewhere, so maybe let me just preempt it.
Yes.
For apartments, apartment owners currently don't pay land rates and land rent directly. Okay. What they do is they pay service charge to the management company, and if you want to have more understanding between that relationship between apartment owners and the management company, you can check the video that we did on apartments. It's going to be linked in the description box. So basically, the apartment owners pay service charge to the management company. Then out of that service charge, a portion of it is now used to pay the land rates and the land rent for the mother title for everyone else. So you mnachanga kidogo kidogo, then you pay for the entire title. So maybe that's what I wanted to clarify about the apartment owners. Although recently I saw a proposal where they could make apartment owners pay their own land rates and land rent, but that hasn't been implemented yet. Yes.
Oh yeah, that was supposed to be implemented after you have acquired your own title, right? So it's important that you said that, because at some point during this conversation I wanted to ask you about that, like as an apartment owner, should I be worried about all these taxes? So that's
not just yet.
Yes, okay, all right. And when it comes to that time, we will invite Wamuyu again to come and tell us what we're supposed to do in order to make sure that we are always tax compliant. Thank you, Wamuyu, for gracing our set as always, and thank you for being so wise and breaking these things down in a way that you can understand. And if there are any more regulations about paying more taxes, we will invite you again. It's always a joy for me to invite you again.
Yeah.
And with that, my name is Agatha from the Wealth Tribe, and this is where we learn how to build wealth together.